The Galactic Council had designed the test to be impossible. Commander Elise Ward stood at the edge of the training field, watching the latest batch of recruits file into position. 23 cubs from the Lyrian species, feline-like beings barely into adolescence, their spotted fur rippling with nervous energy. The council observers sat in their protected viewing boxes, mandibles clicking, tentacles coiling, all waiting to witness another failure. The cubs were young, too young by any reasonable standard. Their homeworld had been consumed by the Void Swarm 6 months ago, and these survivors represented the last of their kind. The council had offered sanctuary, but demanded proof of military viability in return. A species that couldn't fight didn't deserve resources in wartime. Elise had seen this pattern before. The council would throw impossible challenges at refugee species, watch them break, then shunt them to labor colonies with apologetic efficiency. Humanity had barely escaped that fate themselves, 70 years ago. The test was simple in its cruelty: withstand a simulated artillery barrage without breaking formation. The cannons fired sonic rounds that felt like explosions but caused no permanent damage, just terror, just pain, just the overwhelming instinct to run. Most species fled within 30 seconds. Rin, the eldest of the cubs at barely 14 standard years, stood at the front of the formation. Her amber eyes found Elise's, and the human commander saw something there that made her chest tighten. Not fear, but desperate hope. "Commander Ward," the Kravik adjudicator's voice crackled through the speakers, its translation matrix rendering the insectoid language into flat, emotionless standard. "You may begin when ready. As per protocol, no physical contact or interference is permitted once the test commences." Elise walked slowly toward the formation. The cubs' ears swiveled to track her movement, tails twitching. She could smell their fear scent on the wind, sharp and acrid. She stopped 3 meters in front of Rin. "Listen to me," Elise said quietly, her voice carrying just far enough. "The cannons are going to fire. They're loud. They feel like death. Your instincts will scream at you to run." Several cubs whimpered. One near the back began to shake. "But here's what humans learned a long time ago," Elise continued. "Fear is just a feeling, it passes. And you, all of you, are stronger than any feeling." She met Rin's eyes. "When the cannons start, I'm going to count to 3. Just 3 seconds. You stay still until I finish counting. Can you do that?" Rin's voice was barely a whisper. 3 seconds? 3 seconds, Elise confirmed. "Then I'll count to 3 again. And again. You just focus on my voice and stay still for 3 seconds at a time. Don't think about the whole test. Just 3 seconds." The Kravik adjudicator's voice buzzed with impatience. "Commander, protocol requires—" "I'm ready," Elise called out, not breaking eye contact with Rin. "Begin." The first cannon fired. The sound was apocalyptic. A wall of pressure and noise that turned air into a weapon. The sonic round detonated above the formation and every cub flinched. Several dropped to crouching positions. 2 at the edges bolted 3 steps before freezing, remembering. But Rin stood still. Her whole body trembled, pupils dilated to black pools, but she stood still. "1," Elise said calmly. The second cannon fired. Then the third. The barrage had begun in earnest now, a rolling thunder designed to break minds. The cubs were crying openly, yowling in distress, but they held their positions. 2, Elise said. A fourth cannon. A fifth. The youngest cub, barely 10 years old, collapsed to his knees, claws digging into the dirt. But he didn't run. He looked at Rin, and Rin's tail curled forward to touch his shoulder. The Lyrian gesture of reassurance. 3, Elise finished. In the observation boxes, the council representatives leaned forward. This was already lasting longer than expected. 1, Elise began again. The pattern emerged. Every 3 seconds, the cubs had a milestone, a finish line they could comprehend. The barrage raged around them, sonic pressure waves distorting the air, dirt kicking up in clouds, but the formation held. 2. Rin's ears were flat against her skull, her fangs bared in an unconscious grimace, but her eyes never left Elise's face. 3, 20 seconds, 30. The Kravik adjudicator made a sound that the translator couldn't parse. In the boxes, tentacles uncurled. Mandibles stopped clicking. 1, 40 seconds. One cub vomited from the sensory overload but remained in formation. Another was bleeding from the nose. the sonic pressure too much for their delicate membranes. Still they stood. 2. The observation boxes were completely silent now. 3. 1 minute. The cannons intensified, doubling their rate of fire. Protocol dictated escalation at the 1-minute mark. Most species had already broken by then, making the escalation purely academic. The cubs screamed. Not in terror, but in defiance. A sound that started with Rin and rippled through the formation. The Lyrian war cry unused since their homeworld fell. They were cubs, yes. Orphans and refugees, but in that moment they were warriors. 1, Elise said, her voice cutting through the chaos. 2, 3, 90 seconds, 2 minutes. The cannons reached their maximum output, sound becoming almost solid. A pressure that hammered down from above. 3 cubs collapsed but didn't retreat. They held their ground on hands and knees, blood dripping from their ears. Rin's legs buckled. She fell to one knee, but she looked at Elise and mouthed the word, 3. The cannon stopped. Silence crashed down like another explosion. The cubs stood in their formation, most still upright, all still present. Not a single one had run. The test timer showed 2 minutes and 47 seconds. The Lyrian cubs had lasted longer than the previous record holder, a species of armored reptilians who'd evolved on a high-gravity death world. The cubs had lasted longer because a human had taught them to count to 3. In the observation boxes, the council representatives were on their feet. The Kravik adjudicator's translation matrix had apparently given up, emitting only static. Elise walked to the formation. She stopped in front of Rin and extended her hand, the human gesture of respect and equality. Rin looked at the hand, then up at Elise's face. Slowly, she extended her own paw and gripped the human's hand. "You passed," Elise said quietly. Rin's voice was hoarse from screaming. "We counted." "You did more than count," Elise replied. "You trusted." "That's harder." Behind her, the council representatives were already conferring, their protocols shattered by what they'd witnessed. The cubs would get their sanctuary, their training, their chance. But more importantly, they'd learned what humans had figured out centuries ago, in trenches and bunkers and desperate last stands. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's just staying still for 3 more seconds, and then 3 more after that, and sometimes 3 seconds is all you need to change everything.